So good evening, everyone. My name is Kelsey. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the undergrad recruitment coordinator for the Faculty of Engineering here at the University of Waterloo. Thank you for joining us for Tips for Applying webinar tonight. I am going to get started here. Dive right in with some housekeeping before we have Bill start our presentation. So first, I just want to give our territorial acknowledgement. So the University of Waterloo acknowledges that much of our work takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our main campus is situated on the Haldeman Track. This is the land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on either side of the Grand River. Our active work towards reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, teaching, and community building, and is coordinated within the Office of Indigenous Relations. Please visit nativeland.ca to learn more about the land that you occupy. So throughout the webinar, we encourage you to submit your questions through the Q&A function on your screen. The chat option is not opened and you're not able to raise your hand or anything like that. So if you do have any questions or anything, please post them in our Q&A function. We have a lot of great people on the call today who are eager and ready to answer any questions that you have. We also have the option for closed captioning if that's something that will help you tonight. If you're, so it's just, under our little more option, the language, and you can turn on those live captions. If there's any questions that we're not able to answer tonight, or if you have any additional questions after our webinar, please feel free to email enginfo@uwaterloo.ca with any specific admission questions. So on our call tonight, we have a couple experts on the call. Our front-facing presenters here are William Bishop, the Director of Engineering Admissions and a continuing lecturer. We have Anna Franco, 1B Systems Design Engineering students, and we have Ipan Archlam, our 2B Chemical Engineering students. So we will hear from all of these people throughout the webinar. So we will get right into it, and I will pass it over to Bill.
Thanks, Kelsey. So my name is William Bishop. I'm the Director of Admissions for the Faculty of Engineering at the University of Waterloo, and my pronouns are he, him. We'll start first with the most important requirement, which is when you need to apply. For students applying through the Ontario University Application Centre, the deadline this year is January 15th for engineering programs. That is different from the application deadline for other University of Waterloo programs, so it's very important to make sure that you get the correct deadline. It's January 15th. Of course, that's the deadline for applying. The submission of required application documents, including the admission information form that we'll talk about a little bit later, as well as the interview and any other supplemental documentation that's required, will be January 31st this year. Note this is different than in the past year. Last year there was an early consideration deadline. We do not have that this year. We've unified the deadline on a single date. So there's just one date to apply and all applicants will be considered in our early round of admission. If you're thinking about when you may receive an offer from the University of Waterloo for an engineering program, it'll be between February and May for the majority of the programs that students are applying to. And most of our offers will probably be made in mid-May this year. At that time, all decisions will be finalized and offer letters will be available on Quest. Now, if you're thinking about applying for the University of Waterloo, it's important to take the right courses. We do have 5 required courses if you're staying in the Ontario Secondary School curriculum. The first 2 courses are mathematics courses. One is advanced functions, the other is calculus and vectors. Then we have 2 science courses, chemistry and physics, and we have an English course. In addition to that, we expect students to take one other 4U or 4M course. A common question is whether the 4M course is treated the same as the 4U. The answer is yes. So it can be either a 4M or a 4U, and it will be handled the exact same way. The course grade requirement is 70% in each of those courses as a minimum, and an 85% average as a minimum. Of course, the higher the grade, the more likely it is that you'll receive an offer of admission. We also have other curriculums listed here. For example, the IB curriculum, you need to have a total of 32, excluding diploma points, and a course grade requirement of 4 in each course taken. And you can see the requirements for the various courses listed there. If you're in the American curriculum, again, there's some flexibility here because not every school is the same. If you have any doubts, you can always contact us to get clarification. But the suggested curriculum and the suggested courses taken are the ones listed here. The course grade requirement is 75%, so a little bit higher in the American curriculum, and the average requirement moves to 88%. If you're staying in the Indian curriculum, then it's going to be a course grade requirement of 70% and 85%, similar to OSS, and you're expected to take the standard 12 courses listed on the slide. Now, when we evaluate applicants for admission, we look at everything that you provide us with. That means that we'll be looking not only at your grades, but also at your extracurricular activities as documented on the admission information form. And we'll also be looking at how you do on the online interview if you complete that. Successful engineering applicants typically have an admission average in the high 80s to mid 90s, although there are some programs where the averages are often even higher than that as well. And there are some, quite honestly, where an average in the mid 80s may be sufficient. No admission average will guarantee an offer of admission. So even if you have a 99% average or a 100% average, you're not guaranteed an offer of admission unless, of course, you meet all of our requirements and you turn out to be the best applicant that's in the applicant pool for us. So, when we're looking at our applicants, obviously you have to do well not only on your grades, but also on these other measures that we have, the admission information form and the optional interview. Now, I indicate that the interview is optional, and that's true for the vast majority of our applicants, but for applicants applying to software engineering, the interview this year is a new requirement. And the reason for that is that we're using a new admission information form this year, and we've moved the programming knowledge question from the admission information form over to the interview assessment. So for those students applying to software engineering, you'll get an additional question in writing that asks you about your programming knowledge and experience. And that's very similar to the one that has been used in the past. Now, a very common question that we receive is what number of students do we take into our various programs? So here we list what we refer to as the student intake, the number of newly admitted students, typically from high school, but not always, into those programs. So here we see that the program sizes range quite a bit in size, the smallest program being geological engineering with an expected intake of about 25 students, to the largest program, which is computer engineering with an intake of about 235 students. You can also see what we indicate as the minimum competitive average, and what this really refers to is the type of average that a student would have gotten in with last year, potentially. It doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to get in with an average in that range, but it means that at least one student last year got in with an average in that range. The grade ranges shown on the chart apply, of course, for Ontario secondary school applicants. We understand that every curriculum is different. It's very difficult to compare one curriculum to the other, but we do have conversion factors to make that a reality. It's important to remember that most of our applicants come from the Ontario secondary school curriculum, so this is probably the best guidance that we can provide. In a typical year, we have about 14,000 applicants that apply to Waterloo Engineering. There's about 4,000 applicants offered admission. About 2,000 applicants will accept offers of admission, typically by June 1st. And 1,800 students will typically register for first-year engineering classes in the fall. Now, a very common question that we get asked is how we treat IB and AP courses. IB is the International Baccalaureate, and AP is the Advanced Placement courses. The first thing that applicants often ask is whether these courses qualify for transfer credits. And in the context of engineering programs, the answer is no. For a degree to be accredited for professional engineering licensing, all courses must be reviewed by external assessors. And what this would mean is that if we wanted to give credit to high school courses, we would have to be willing to send out the assessors to go to those various high schools. And that's obviously a very difficult problem for a school like Waterloo, where we get students from all over the world. So we do not award transfer credits for IB courses or AP courses. You will have to retake that material. Usually students will find that they may be a little bit ahead in one of the areas that they're studying, but perhaps that gives them more time to dedicate to other activities. We do recommend that students inform us if they're taking IB and AP courses, partly because it may not always be clear on the transcript. So if you tell us about this on your application, it'll guarantee that we know that you've taken those courses in that manner. Now, as I said, there is a programming knowledge requirement for the software engineering applicants. Applicants to software engineering are required to have some experience developing well-structured modular programs, and it's sometimes difficult to demonstrate this, particularly if a student is studying at a high school that perhaps doesn't offer computing courses, or the courses don't fit into your schedule, or in some cases, a student may already be at a level that's far beyond what the high school courses would typically involve. So we do allow for a wide range of ways of demonstrating this knowledge. The easiest way, of course, is to take a programming course in high school. Could be a grade 11 course or a grade 12 course in computer science, and that certainly will demonstrate the knowledge that we're looking for. For some students, programming experience can be obtained through work experience. So there are some students that may be working in their summers and may have experience that's relevant. And for other students, you may demonstrate in many other ways, including projects that you may have worked on, perhaps out of school, extracurricular activities. It could even be science fair projects and various other things that students often do. So we leave it fairly open-ended. We leave it up to applicants to demonstrate to us that they have the knowledge that's required to be successful in that program. As far as the English language requirements go, most Ontario secondary school students, if you've been studying in Ontario high schools for 4 years, you will not be subject to any sort of testing requirement. But there are cases where a test could be required. For example, if you've taken English as a second language within the last 2 years of study, or if, for example, you have not studied in an English language school for the past 4 years. If that's the case, then these English tests are ways to establish that you meet the English language requirements for our program. If you don't meet the English language requirements, there's also a pathway to success that we call the Bridge to Academic Success in English. And this is a program specially designed to help students who may be very strong in math and science, but perhaps need to improve their English language skills. And that can be completed in two different ways. One is through a short summer program that happens prior to the start of the fall academic term, or it can be done as a two-term program prior to starting into the engineering program of entry. I'll talk a little bit about the application process and the types of things that we look for in the application. So the first thing is to make sure that you understand all of the requirements for completing an application. The first step is, of course, completing the application on the Ontario University Application Center. And once you do that, you will eventually receive communication from the University of Waterloo that will allow you to set up an account and complete what's known as the admission information form. To complete this form, there's multiple sections to it. It's important that you not only save out the information, but also that you submit all sections of that form. So this form is something that you should take your time completing and make sure that you fill it out correctly. Once you've completed the online video interview, which is kind of the next step in the process, you will then need to provide any additional documentation that's requested by admission officers. So sometimes an admission officer at the university may reach out to you if, for example, a language test score is required or if a grade is missing. This is particularly true if you're studying outside an Ontario high school because outside of Ontario, we don't get the grades automatically. For students studying inside of Ontario high schools, we do get the grades automatically, and you won't ever be requested to provide grades unless, of course, you've studied outside Ontario prior to the most recent school year. If you're not attending an Ontario high school, so let's say, for example, you're studying in a province like Alberta or BC or Nova Scotia, anytime you get updated unofficial grades, we encourage you to communicate this to an admission officer, and that way we can update your file with new grades. Of course, we will eventually need proper documentation of those grades, but we can consider you using the grades that you provide electronically initially. As far as the admission cycle goes, we've already talked about the deadlines, but just to remind you, January 15th is the deadline for applying on the Ontario University Application Centre site. And then January 31st is the deadline for submitting the admission information form, the online video interview, and any other supporting documents. Now, of course, for students staying out of province, perhaps you won't have all of your grades by the January 31st deadline. That's okay. When you get new transcripts, when you get new grades, even if it's after the January 31st deadline, we encourage you to provide those to us so that we can update your file accordingly. But by January 31st, we want to receive at least the first set of grades, the admission information form, and the online video interview, and any test scores that you may have already completed at that time. Final admission decisions, like I said, will be communicated in mid-May, and this will include all of our scholarship offers. So applicants won't know what scholarship they receive until mid-May. That's when all of our scholarships get finalized, even if you're admitted in the March timeframe. Now I'll talk a little bit about completing the admission information form. So the admission information form is a way of learning more about our applicants. Basically, it's your opportunity to tell us about any extracurricular activities that you're involved with, any enrichment courses, awards, and achievements, any sort of work or volunteer experience that you've been involved with. And if you're interested in being considered for an alternate engineering program, kind of a second choice, if you will, you can specify this on the admission information form. And this year, as I said, we are using a new holistic admission information form that's designed to evaluate applicants in a more complete way. It hopefully will help us identify the best applicants to our programs and do so in a way that I think is preferred by students moving forward. The admission information form is required for admissions, and it's also required for some entrance scholarships as well. It will be computed, a grade will be assessed to it, if you will, and that grade will be computed and used to rank the applicants for scholarships. So here are some tips for a grade admission information form. The most important thing I can say is that when you're listing activities, employment and awards on the form, always prioritize ones that are most recent or most significant. The reason for that is when somebody's assessing a form, most typically what they'll see on the first line is what's going to stick with them most. So if you have a very significant achievement, you want obviously to be something that the assessor will see right at the start. Don't be afraid to brag about your accomplishments. There are some applicants that are very good at this and some applicants that are not. It's obviously difficult for some applicants to really brag about accomplishments because they perhaps don't feel the confidence for doing so. But we strongly encourage you to tell us about everything that you've done that's of significance, and don't discount the significance of accomplishments. Sometimes I've spoken to applicants and they'll tell me about an amazing accomplishment that they have, but they say, well, that's not relevant to the program that I'm applying to. Uh, the funny part about it is that you should always list important accomplishments, even if they're on the periphery. So, for example, maybe you were employee of the month at a part-time job. That is actually a significant accomplishment. And you may think, well, how is that relevant to engineering? Well, it speaks to your ability to deal with customers and to deal with fellow employees, to work as part of a team. Those are really important accomplishments. So don't be afraid to brag about those. When describing an achievement, always provide details on the significance of the achievement. For example, it's much better to say first place out of 10,000 students than it is to just say first place. If you receive a $10,000 scholarship, that's great. But if we know it's a $10,000 scholarship for leadership, that's better, right? It's good for us to know that. I've had applicants who have listed scholarship names, and unfortunately, we weren't able to determine what the scholarship was for. It was named after a donor, and when we went to look up the scholarship, we couldn't find any information on it. So it's great for us to be able to know what the scholarship's for. If you've competed on a team, is it at the provincial level? Is it at the national level? Or is it at the regional level? That can make a difference not only in kind of the significance of the achievement, but also in terms of the time commitment. And be precise when describing dates and hours of involvement. We do ask for this on the form. Now, at the same time that we task you to, be confident and brag about your accomplishments, it's also important to be honest about your experiences and who you are. It is sometimes the case that we catch applicants who have actually lied on their application, and in those cases, those students are not admitted. But one thing you should know is that often universities will share that information. So if you get detected for lying on an application at one university, it could potentially jeopardize your ability to get accepted or admitted to other universities as well. So fraudulent behavior, where there's clearly evidence that something's been said that's knowingly untrue, will be dealt with severely. Now, as far as selecting an alternate engineering program goes, a good alternate program choice is one that interests you. It doesn't make sense to list a program that you don't want to study. You shouldn't plan on trying to get into one program and then immediately transfer out. That won't work. At the University of Waterloo, we rarely have the ability to transfer large numbers of students. So the odds of being able to transfer from one program to another within the engineering faculty is unfortunately fairly low. Some engineering programs cannot be selected as an alternate. The two that come to mind are software engineering and biomedical engineering. The reason for this is that these are highly competitive programs, and we're looking for very specific students for these programs. So if you're not admitted to another program in engineering, we would not deflect you into these programs. Only choose an alternate engineering program if you're willing to study the program. So if you're choosing an alternate just to have a backup plan, if you will, but you'll never accept that offer, don't list as an alternate because you may be taking away a space from another qualified applicant, and we don't want that to happen. Our goal is obviously to admit as many applicants as possible to an engineering program that interests them. So we want students to get into their first choice program, obviously, that's our preference. And we do give strong preference to those that have listed the program as their choice. And then we look for alternate engineering programs when we have spaces available. So let's say, for example, we can't fill a program, then we'll look to the alternate applicants. Remember that you can always study courses from another program through options. An option is a collection of courses that are available in a particular theme area. An example might be a software engineering option, the mechatronics option, or the artificial intelligence option. There are new options being created all the time. I believe there was one that was recently created in quantum computing. And there are also other ways that you can take courses outside of your discipline. So there are many ways that you can get the experience of other programs without actually being in those programs. But you have to be happy in the program that you're in. Now I'll talk a little bit about improving your chance of admission success. So we offer an online video interview. This is optional for most applicants, but required for software engineering applicants. This is a way of, again, attracting the attention of the admissions officers to basically draw attention to the fact that you're a strong applicant to our program. We highly recommend completing the interview for all applicants. Not only will it boost your chance of being admitted to our programs, it will also increase the likelihood of receiving a scholarship. The question this year is, what experiences inside or outside of the classroom motivated you to apply to your chosen engineering program? And this will be the same question for every single applicant. Software engineering and systems design engineering do have an additional question to complete. For software engineering, it's a written question on programming knowledge and experience. For systems design engineering, it's a question related to a particular scholarship. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to the link provided at the bottom of this slide, and that will help you learn more about the online video interview and what to expect. As far as interviewing well goes, it's important to remember that even if you have an off day, the interview score is still going to improve your admission chances because it's just added to your admission average. So even a poorly completed interview improves your chance of receiving an admission offer. And we recognize that most applicants are fairly inexperienced with respect to interviews. It's quite often the case that applicants will show some signs of nervousness and perhaps the questions won't be answered as well as they might have liked. Our assessors are trained to focus on the content of the interview. So if you have any sort of problem with public speaking, for example, or if you stuttered, that won't affect the scoring of the interview. We're really looking at the content and how you address the questions. And like I said, we know that you're going to be nervous doing this. It's a pretty daunting task to ask and answer a question in a short period of time. So we know that students don't often interview very well. The few that do, they do stand out, and that obviously helps their chances of being admitted. So if you want to interview well, there are things that you can do to make yourself feel a bit more comfortable. One is to practice a little bit in advance of the interview. You know what the question is, so you can think about what you want to talk about. Another thing is that you can put yourself into a quiet place. You want to be relaxed when you're doing the interview. You don't want to do it after you've had a rough day at school, for example. Wait until you have an opportunity where you feel confident and ready to do the interview, and it'll go well. And now we'll talk a little bit about a few other considerations. So, some applicants may have had grades that were significantly affected by an unaccommodated or suspected disability, illness, or trauma. If this happens to be applicable to you, you can request special consideration by completing additional documentation on our website. And there's more information on this process that's provided at the link that's shown there for special consideration. We do also have these links frequently included in our materials so that you can easily find them. But even if you just search Google for special consideration University of Waterloo, you should find it very quickly. Of course, if you're applying for special consideration, it's important to provide additional documentation, often it's medical documentation or other documentation to support your claim. Not all students who apply for special consideration receive special consideration. Again, it has to be unaccommodated. Often the school will follow up with high schools to find out if any accommodations were already given for the particular situation that's being mentioned. Now, this slide tries to give you an idea of how much university costs and how you can finance your education. I will say that the text of this slide is constantly changing, so it's really important to visit our website to find out more about the scholarships that are available. So there are a number of entrance scholarships and bursaries that you're automatically considered for. The most common scholarships that students receive are the President's Scholarship and the President's Scholarship of Distinction. The President's Scholarship is a value of $2,000 that's awarded to every admitted student with an average in high school between 90% and 95%, if you will. The President's Scholarship of Distinction is the $2,000 award plus an additional opportunity in a future term to receive $1,500 either towards pursuing an international research experience or an international co-op experience. So that's a nice bonus to have in a future year. There are some $10,000 scholarships for international students that are entrance scholarships. And there are a number of scholarships that we provide as well that are what we call named entrance scholarships that are not shown on this slide, but we'll talk about them on the next slide. As far as tuition goes for a domestic student for 1 year of the program right now, it's about $18,000. For an international student, it's about $73,000. That's a bit more expensive. If you're a permanent resident, you will pay the domestic tuition. If you're an international student that's dependent upon a Canadian or permanent resident, so if, for example, your parents are Canadian, you will pay domestic tuition. Of course, it's always good to get that verified for your particular situation. In your co-op work term, you can earn anywhere from kind of a low of $9,600, although that's probably gone up a little bit now that minimum wage has gone up to about $22,500 Canadian. And if you are looking to work in the US or abroad, you may find that those earnings are actually substantially higher as well, because often they're paid in US dollars, and students in Silicon Valley, for example, have higher living expenses. So they often get paid much more than those earnings are listed there. Residence runs anywhere from 7,000 to 9,200. The meal plan is between $6,000 and $7,000 roughly. And personal expenses, students report averaging about 4,300 a year. Books and supplies can be as high as $2,500, but they could be lower depending upon how you pursue books and supplies. Now, as I said, there are other entrance scholarships. These are ones that are named after donors. Most typically, for architecture, we have several scholarships that range from $1,000 to about $2,500. These ones are based on your grades, the portfolio that you have to submit for architecture, which is a unique requirement to the architecture program, and the interview that's conducted. For most of our engineering programs, we have scholarships that range between $1,000 and $5,000. There's actually quite a few, probably close to 100 of these types of scholarships that we have. And again, these are based on academic performance, but of course, for engineering programs, the admission information form, which becomes a requirement, and the online video interview, which is recommended, also factor into the selection of those scholarships. There are some international scholarships valued at $10,000 a year. Again, application is not required for these particular scholarships. And of course, for engineering programs, it's based on the AIF and the online video interview. For architecture, it'd be the portfolio and the interview. There are other entrance scholarships as well, although we indicate there's one at 20,000. I looked at the list today and now that there's at least three and maybe more. There's also some that span multiple faculties at the University of Waterloo, and these actually go up in higher dollar amounts as well. So there are quite a few scholarships. Many of them do not require any sort of application at all. The one that I'll draw your attention to is the scholarship at the bottom. This is one where an application is required, and that is the Engineering Entrance Awards for Black and Indigenous students. When you apply for these awards, you'll also be considered for all other awards for Black and Indigenous students as well. So not only are there the five awards at the engineering level valued at $5,000 each, but there's also several other university level awards that are valued at higher dollar values. I do encourage you to take advantage of all opportunities if you're trying to maximize your chances of getting into Waterloo. Obviously, you need to clearly highlight everything that you've done that could potentially influence the decision. If you have any extracurricular activities, which can be not only activities that are done outside of kind of course work that you do inside of school, but could be outside of school as well, right? So maybe you're on like a basketball team locally, or maybe you're in a summer league for baseball, for example. Those are extracurricular as well. Make sure you indicate anything that may be relevant for your admission consideration. Make sure you take time completing your AIF. The number one mistake that people make is to leave it to the last minute and try to complete it on the day that it's due. Often students will say to me that they don't want to complete it early because they're afraid they might forget something or they might receive an award on the last day. In reality, that's rarely the case. There's not a lot of awards given out in January, for example. So it's not typically a time when we see new things appearing. But the other thing to keep in mind is that most of the information that goes on your admission information form is based on the last couple of years. Significant activities will be ones that you've been involved with for quite some time. Make sure you use the online video interview to highlight your passion for engineering. Even if you have no experience directly related to your proposed field of study, you should be able to indicate why you're interested in the program. So that's always a great thing to be able to do. Perhaps it's the influence of someone around you, like a friend or a family member. Perhaps it's a motivation simply because of something that you've learned about in school. But regardless, it's good to have a reason for why you want to pursue your proposed field of study. And if you have any questions, make sure you reach out to our admission officers. If you have questions regarding the general application process, these can be directed to myapplication@urlu.ca. And if you have any general questions, they can be emailed to enginfo@urlu.ca. So one last piece of advice, I think a very important piece of advice. I know it can be very daunting applying for university. Often students are kind of focusing on things that have happened in the past and perhaps not things that are happening right now. It's important to remember to try to focus your energy on things you can control. So, as a student going through grade 12, for example, you can control your grades this term by studying and preparing for your courses. If you're distracted, if you're focusing on, perhaps a bad grade that happened at a midterm, uh, you know, you may lose sight of the final exam, which plays a much stronger role in the admission decision. So you want to make sure that you focus on the things that you can control, which are things that happen in the future. Make sure you set aside sufficient time to prepare your application. That's again something you can control. Try to treat the optional steps as being required, and make sure you monitor your email regularly. Every year, there's one or two applicants who effectively do not respond to our emails. So we might need to follow up with them regarding a grade or a course taken. We do not get a response from their email address. We have no way of getting in touch with them realistically, and as a result of that, they may miss out on an admission offer. So make sure you monitor your email regularly. You're not going to miss out if you monitor it once a week. That's fine. You don't have to monitor it hour by hour, but you do need to at least check up on email at least once a week. So make sure that you're monitoring the email address that you use. I know some applicants will create a specific email address for an application because they don't want to have those emails going to their general email box. But that's also the number one way to miss out on something. So be careful about that. And one thing to, of course, do is to ignore the things that you cannot control. Sometimes students will, try to dwell on things like course scheduling issues. Like, for example, the calculus course is only available in the second semester. That's okay. Calculus is often only available in the second semester, and we deal with students who are applying from all different situations. We have ways of dealing with that at the university. That's not something that you should worry about. Um, Poor grades or competition results, again, one poor grade or one poor competition result is not going to change the outcome of an admission decision. When a student is admitted to a program, it's because they have a history of strong grades. And if there's one grade, perhaps English, for example, that's maybe lower than the rest, that's not atypical. But as long as the rest of the grades are strong, it'll be fine. And missed opportunities are a great example of something that you can't control. So, maybe you were supposed to take a test on a particular day, maybe participate in the Euclid, for example, but unfortunately you were sick or you had to be away on that particular day. That's something you can't control, and you just need to move forward with the things that you can do. So now we'll move on to student advice, and I'll return it back to Kelsey. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. All right, so now we're just going to hear from our students. Then we're going to do a little wrap up and then a live Q&A. So I'll pass it over to Anna first.
Thank you, Kelsey. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna, and I'm a 1B Systems Design Engineering student. So to kind of just get started with my application journey, I will say that the question of when I became interested in Waterloo and how I chose my program are completely hand in hand. An important piece of context is that I was an international student applying from Peru, and it's not very common for Peruvian students to go to Canada. So I definitely did not know anything about Canadian universities, and my journey was very research based. So more towards junior year, I had an idea of what criteria was important to me. And when I became interested in Waterloo, it was more of like based on my research, there was a lot of alignment. So this was in criteria in things like employability after graduation or my program, which was systems design. So when it came to actually like choosing like systems design engineering, um, there's of course like every program has their own traits, but what really made me like choose that was, information about the class size, 90 students, not too big. Um, Something that's also like very valuable is that you can see all the courses of the engineering programs. So I could see, for example, that they have design courses, and that was something that was very important to me. And overall, it was just my perception of systems design being a technical degree, but that still had that design aspect and still had a nature of human centricity. Um, but I'd say that overall, resources and things that even like events that I attended that helped me in both deciding kind of in Waterloo and in my program were firstly engineering chats. And I double checked before this, like what the name is now. And I think it's called Ask a Warrior. So if you go into the engineering website, um, you can actually set a one-on-one meeting with a Waterloo engineering student. So I remember that like last year, I set up a meeting with somebody from systems design engineering, and that really helped me just ask any questions that you have, and even just ask maybe more specific questions that are not accessible online. So it's definitely a resource that I would recommend because it's very accessible and it's easy to set up. A second resource that I make note of was just if you browse the Waterloo Engineering website, something you can check out is that for every engineering program, the website kind of lists job positions or kind of job fields that you can go into with that program. And I think that's like very valuable to kind of see or like envision yourself what direction you can go into with that program, as well as I think that for some programs, it gives you comparisons on how it's different to other programs. So I remember with systems design being like confused on how it's different to software and how it's different to management. And that information was available there. So generally just browsing through the Waterloo Engineering website, you can find that information as well as set up a meeting with a Waterloo engineering student. And finally, like the last resource I made note of, which I also think maybe it's a little bit more underrated, is I remember searching for class profiles. So if you search, for example, Systems Design Engineering class of 2022 class profile, it's kind of like a compilation put together by that class of results of a survey made to the class. So I remember when looking through the class profiles, like it gives you statistics on maybe where people are working after graduation or what fields they are going into, and also even just like fun statistics about the class. So that I found that to be like a very good way to kind of get a sense of where people were going with this program. And even if you're not that focused on, okay, where are people working after with this degree, just seeing what people in that degree are interested in allows you to get a better idea of your alignment with certain like pools of interests. So that's definitely something that I would also recommend. Um, Moving on to how I prepared for university and life in Ontario, I definitely I'm gonna separate this into first university and second life. Um, on the university side, maybe my response will be more Waterloo specific. Um, but we all know that when you get here, it depending on your stream, you will have to prepare for applying to co-op. So I remember my biggest kind of like investment of time during the summer before coming to university, preparation wise, was I remember thinking like, okay, what can I do now to make myself more employable in the fall? So I remember I took some like coding lessons online. Um, and I also tried getting work experience during that summer to prepare for Waterloo. And I guess another thing to note is that for Waterloo Engineering, they give you like an optional math course. So that's also something you can do if you're worried about maybe also if you were in Canadian high school, if you're worried that your math level is going to be different, that's definitely something you can do. Um, and then I would say that for life in Ontario, I hadn't come to Canada before actually just like coming to study. So I would say maybe I wasn't that prepared, but some of the resources that really helped me out were one, Reddit. There's a very strong like Waterloo Reddit community online, and you can definitely use that to navigate things like maybe like residence or just like general tips. That was a resource that I used that was pretty helpful. Another thing that I would use would be just searching day in my life as a university student in Ontario or in Waterloo. And that really helped me just get a sense of what people did in their day to day and kind of envision myself being in Ontario. I guess an important aspect to note as well is that if you're feeling maybe a bit stressed or anxious about that, preparing for university life, when you enter in first year, if you're in residence, that allows for a much easier transition. So that that's just like an aspect to acknowledge that makes things easier. And something I will say is that I don't think I was super prepared for the live aspect in Ontario. But when you get here, you have orientation, you have so many resources available. So they really like help you prepare on the go. Um, so yeah, if you're feeling anxious about that, everything like works itself out, especially when you actually start. moving on to the last part of, is there anything I do differently, or do I have any final pieces of advice? I also wanted to answer these hand in hand. And I think what I'm going to say is really applicable to this whole process everyone's going through of like applying and like having to think about the future and preparing. Something that I wish I had done differently, even though I did do some preparation in the summer. I wish I had done my resume before, or I wish I had done like more specific things for the application process of co-op. Um, and the reason behind it, I remember thinking like, oh, I can't do this because it's too much stress. And I don't know why people maybe like online exaggerate that your summer before Waterloo is like the last summer of your life. That's not the case. um, and what I will say is that doing, for example, your resume during the summer is going to be a much more like calm setting. You're going to have much more time than when you're actually in more of a high stress or maybe high pressure situation in your first month of university. Um, so what I'm trying to maybe communicate with my piece of advice is that that reaction of maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed or a bit stressful to all these action items you have to do to prepare. So maybe you're going to hear people tell you, oh, it'd be helpful if you do this or that. Sometimes I can feel stressful, but that short-term stress is going to be less than the like long-term stress that may be induced by not preparing. So kind of approaching all of the preparation as a way to avoid stress rather than that it induce stress. So I guess that would be like my final piece of advice for the application journey. Um, and yeah, thank you. I'll take it back to Kelsey.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. All right. Now we are going to hear from IPEN. We should be on the call.
Yep. Hello.
Awesome.
My name is Ipan. I will be entering my third year of chemical engineering in winter. Just completed my 2B term last term. I'm currently working as a management consultant in downtown Toronto. When did I become interested in applying for Waterloo? I would say around grade 10, grade 9. I always wanted to pursue engineering, but I didn't have an idea of what specific fields of engineering I would want to go into. So I thought to choose one of the core engineerings and then do a master's degree to specialize or broaden my opportunities to work abroad, where like, because everywhere around the world, everyone knows you're civil, mechanical, you're electrical, you're chemical. So I can transfer those skills or transfer that degree to other locations. So I decided to choose chemical as I was interested in chemistry, physics, and mathematics. And the events I attended were the Waterloo Open House Day, and they ran a shadow day as I was able to see what a chemical engineering student, what classes they go to, what labs they go to, and how they manage their studies, any tips that they have. And I would definitely recommend all of these events as it just helps me and that can help you prepare for university and is a great resource to have as you can be in that environment for those day or those couple of hours and get a better understanding of the university where you will spend your next 5 years. And for the resources I would recommend for choosing a program, it would mainly, as it's been stated before, identify what industry you want to go to, but also one key tip is your degree name doesn't consolidate you to a certain line. As I know people who have chemical engineering backgrounds, but are working in IT software. People that are from mech-eng backgrounds are working in various industries, as that's the flexibility with an engineering degree, is you can work in a plethora of industries as those soft skills that you learn in class and while at work during your co-ops are transferable. So then don't always narrow it down. So let's say you like a certain super specific thing, you can try and see if you can enter that industry through another path as well. Or if for a certain specialized industry, a master's might be required. And then how did I prepare for university life / life in Ontario? I'm from Milton, and I lived on residence for my first year. And I prepared by discussing with upper years from high school that I knew about their experience living at Waterloo, what clubs, what activities, what design teams they recommended, studying habits, and management tips. And then I did watch YouTube videos online, day in the life of a Waterloo University and student in engineering, or if it was just a like lifestyle, whether it be a certain type of residence, certain type of like reading or studying location that they recommended, or what to do on campus. So I definitely check those stuff out on YouTube. And then the campus housing does have stuff as well. And then another thing I would recommend for preparing for university is working on your learning skills, as I would say the jump from high school to university is quite large. So I spent summer doing the math course and learning content ahead of time. So then the transition is a little bit less daunting and less stressful. So then if you can work on your learning skills, identify if this works for math content, if this works for science courses, hone in on them, and then you're automatically kind of set and you understand how you learn. And then you can transition that to university and work on your resume if you're in stream 4, as you'll be applying for co-op in September. And then in stream 8, it's also good to have, as you don't have to worry about it over the winter break or in January. And is there anything I would do differently if I could do it again? I would say I would try and like not limit myself to a certain industry. As my like first co-op was in materials engineering, I always thought if I'm in chemical engineering, I need to do a co-op related to chemical engineering. Through the co-op system, you have 6 co-ops and you can explore various different industries using your transferable skills. And that can allow you to find a industry or company that you want to pursue, do a full-time job in after graduation. So then you can either go a specialist route and do all in the same line or try various different industries and companies. And for the pieces of advice, I would say is take it slow, don't be overstressed, plan in advance, state that, oh, this is the day I'll finish my AIF, I'll get it reviewed by my parents, I will get everything double checked to make sure there's any like spelling errors or anything. And then I'd prepare for the video interview, make sure that your camera is good, you are sounding confident, and then just follow along the application process. And then after you do get acceptance, you'll get the constant emails about orientation, residence, and like you can try and connect with your roommates in advance if possible to try and sort out that situation. And then explore clubs online to see what you're interested in. And clubs are great for, like design teams are great for your resume as well, as they're sometimes like companies do sponsor those design teams. And there's a great chance that you can network at those events for co-op experience. And that's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyways, just a couple wrap up here, and then I'll head to the live Q&A. I see lots of questions coming in as we are slowly answering them. So just a couple of dates to keep in mind here, just some more webinars that we have and some events that are coming up. I will note that the webinars that we have done already will be emailed out to all the participants. It's also posted on our website and our YouTube channel. So keep an eye out for that. If you missed any of the previous webinars, upcoming, we have our fall open house on Saturday, November 9th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. I would definitely check that out. If you are interested, you can register on our website. It is open. I will note that Waterloo campus will be opened and Cambridge campus will also be holding their open house. If you're interested in architecture, our School of Architecture will have their open house on the same day as main campus. We also just have a couple other program-specific webinars for chemical engineering, nanotechnology, and environmental and geological engineering. So just if you want to learn a little more about those programs, please register for those upcoming webinars. So if you do have any questions, you can continue to post them in the Q&A. I just wanted to say thank you so much for our presenters tonight. And then just a couple other things to note here that we've briefly mentioned. We do have our engineering shadow days. I have the link on the slide here. This is what IPEN had mentioned, where prospective students are able to complete a form online, talk about the program that they're interested in, and we will connect them with a current student in that program, and they'll come and spend the day at Waterloo. So it's a great way to attend classes, lectures, labs, get that personal experience at Waterloo, and also that student interaction with the current student and kind of having any questions or anything that you have answered by the student. Also get just the experience to be at Waterloo. We also have our Ask a Warrior platform that Anna had mentioned. So that is our chat with an engineering student ambassador link on the slide here. This is where you are able to see all of our student ambassadors and the programs that they're in, and you're able to chat with a current student, ask any questions you have, or set up a video call, which is a great way to just get that student experience and student side of things and understand the program a little bit better. We also offer tours all the time during the week. We have our tours Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 a.m. and Wednesdays at 2 p.m. So you can definitely check out our website and register just for a generic engineering tour if you're unable to make our open house. I will also note that we do have a March open house. So depending on what grade you guys are in or where you're at in your admission cycle, if you can't make it to our open house in November, you can definitely join us in March. And if you do have any additional admission questions, please feel free to email enginfo@uwaterloo.ca, and our admissions specialist will be happy to answer any questions that you have. I'm just going to ask my presenters to turn their cameras on, and I will take a look through the Q&A here, ask some live questions, so you can continue to post those questions there. Okay, let's see here. So we have a lot of questions, Bill, about the programming experience for software and what specifically is a well-structured modular program. Does it have to be like work experience? Can it be a personal project? Just a little more detail on the requirements for that.
Yeah, so I mean, structured programming is a programming paradigm that I think some students are probably familiar with, but perhaps it's an older term. Any student that's programmed in either a structural programming language or in an object-oriented programming language and has completed a fairly significant program that involves multiple functions or objects would probably meet the requirements for programming knowledge and experience. The easiest way to demonstrate this is, of course, through a high school programming course, but it could also be demonstrated through work experience or personal projects. A common question that I get asked is, for personal projects, how would we know whether the programming knowledge is adequate or not? For many applicants, what they often do is they'll post a link to a GitHub repository or to the code that they've posted online, or perhaps to the program on their website, for example, or on YouTube, so we can actually see what they've done. We don't always get a chance to look at that. Obviously, if we're interested in an applicant, if you're one of the top applicants and we're trying to establish the programming knowledge, we may look at that type of material. But there's lots of applicants to software engineering. So most applicants demonstrate programming knowledge through a course. It could even be an online course. I didn't mention that, but that's another way that you could do it. But that's not the only way.
So, see a question here just about the stream comment that was mentioned. So I will just note certain programs are certain streams. It's just kind of the sequence between co-op and study, just so we don't have everyone applying to jobs at the same times. So certain programs are certain streams. So as IPEN mentioned, Stream 4 would just be you're here for 4 months studying, and then you go right into co-op, and then you'll alternate between study and co-op. Usually from there on out, where Stream 8 would be you're here for 8 months, so you're here for 2 terms, and then you'll go on your co-op, and then you'll alternate between the two. Still the same amount of co-ops in both of the streams. It's just, again, so we don't have everyone applying to the jobs at the same time. Some programs do have dual streams, so you do have an option to select a preference that you may be enrolled into. But again, same amount of co-ops either way, is just when you start that co-op. So with co-op, it is a 5-year program, I will mention, but you do have that 2 years of paid work experience in the end. Let's see here. A lot of AIF questions, Bill. How far back should they look for achievements? If things are a work in progress, should they mention it? Like honor roll was also mentioned, or is there anything specific you're looking for?
Yeah, so there's nothing specific that we look for. I would say more recent achievements are obviously given greater significance than ones further on in the past. So if you did something in grade 8, for example, it probably is not going to affect your admission to the University of Waterloo unless it was something absolutely phenomenal, right? Like, I mean, uh, I don't know if you solved a famous math problem, for example, and you were a child prodigy, maybe something like that would be relevant. But quite honestly, the last 2 years is really what we're looking at in terms of activities typically and experiences. And you have to judge whether something is significant for you or not. For one applicant, perhaps being on the honor roll at a very prestigious school might be an achievement. For another applicant, being on an honor roll, it might not be something that you'd even bother to mention, right? So, if you've already won an international competition or a national competition, saying that you got 80% in your high school probably doesn't matter, right? I mean, we know that everyone by definition has like an 85% entrance average. So if that's how honor roll is defined at your school, probably not a big deal, right? So you have to kind of judge. You'll only have a certain amount of space on the admission information form. And while I certainly don't suggest that students leave things blank, most students will be in the situation of trying to figure out what they can put on the form and get to fit in. And you want to prioritize the things that will stand out the most. And that's really up to you as an applicant to try to understand what will demonstrate that you're a good fit, if you will, for the University of Waterloo and the program that you've chosen.
Awesome. See a couple questions just asking about the early consideration deadline. So I just wanted to reiterate, we do not have an early consideration deadline this year as we have had in previous years. We only have our one deadline, which is January 15th, and all supporting documents are due January 31st. That would be your AIF and the video interview. Again, to note, the questions are online right now for the AIF and the video interview. So you can definitely check out our website and take a look at those. Couple questions, Bill, about summer school or online courses and taking a spare in high school.
Yeah, so I think it's quite normal to take a spare in high school. Often there are schools that are even requiring it. So there are some schools that I'm aware of where they will only let you take the courses that are required to get into university at this point because they're trying to reduce the amount of teaching that they need to do. So we're aware of that. We know that some students will take a spare. As far as taking course in summer school, generally speaking, the summer school courses are courses that we encourage students to use for electives for things that are not required for admission. And that's simply because of the fact that the summer school courses are a bit condensed and often, the grades are not truly representative of performance in general. So if you're taking a course like calculus or physics or English, for example, it's better to take those in the fall and the winter when you're in your regular kind of day school, if you will. It's fine to take them online through your school board. That's perfectly okay. Um, as long as it's kind of in that same time frame, if you will. But if you're taking some of those critical courses in summer school, we certainly discourage students from doing it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you won't be admitted. It just means that we may adjust your grades slightly to try to make your average more representative of what we expect.
I will also mention, I see a couple questions about the only applying to one engineering program. So at Waterloo, you are only able to apply to one of our engineering programs, but you are able to select an alternate on your AIF if that is of interest to you. Just something important to note, and also that software and biomedical are not able to beat that alternate option on your AIF. Let's see here. Questions again about AP and IB grades. Bill, I see a couple questions in there.
Yeah. I mean, the most common question is how do we convert IB grades? And you can find conversions that are online in terms of how those IB grades are typically converted. There's kind of a standard way that schools convert those into the equivalent Ontario secondary school grades. So that's one way of looking at it. But bear in mind, you do need to meet the admission requirements. So in some cases, if you don't have an IB course, you may need to have the Ontario equivalent of the course, for example. Sometimes students are in very interesting situations where they have combinations of AP grades, IB grades, grades from out of province, grades in province. We do our best to try to convert those. Often by the time my team sees them, they've already been converted. So we're not in the business of doing the conversions within the Faculty of Engineering, but it's done at the university level in a consistent way.
Perfect. Let's see here. A couple questions about grade 11 grades. If you're looking at their grade 11 grades to make your decision. Yeah, a couple questions, Bill, about the grade 11 grades for admissions, if that's dependent on their offer or very concerned that they don't have all their grade 12 grades completed, which of course most people do not.
Yeah, so I mean, most applicants do not have all of their grade 12 grades completed. I mean, let's just think about the current situation. Most students are completing their high school and will have courses in their second semester, or if they're not in a semester school, those courses may be in progress, but they may not yet have midterm grades for some of the courses. So when we're assessing students, obviously, if we're missing a grade 12 grade, we're going to try to predict your performance or estimate your performance in grade 12 based on grade 11 and the information that we have available. For some courses, it's quite easy. So, for example, for grade 12 physics, you have a grade 11 physics course that we can use to predict, or chemistry is another example, right? English would be another good example. But for a course like calculus, it's a bit more difficult to predict, just because you haven't taken that material at the grade 11 level. So we do try to predict in various ways, but obviously there's some challenge in doing so. Students will not miss out on getting admitted to Waterloo because they have, a really bad grade 11 grade, and grade 12 is kind of in progress. The reason for that is that by the time we get to our final admission round, we will have at least midterm grades for all grade 12 courses that are in progress. And because of that, we will have grade 12 information by the time we do our final round in mid-May. And that's why we do most of our decisions, or at least half of our decisions, in that mid-May timeframe. That way we have consistent information that we can use for all applicants. And the applicants we admit prior to that mid-May round are applicants that we know will get in even as new grades roll in for the missing information. So, if we have an applicant that had 99% in physics in grade 11 and we don't have a grade 12 grade, we're pretty confident that that student's going to get at least a grade of 90% in grade 12. Statistically, it's very rare that a student suddenly goes from being a top of the class student to being a weak student. So that student would not be displacing a student with a weak grade 11 grade because they would have been admitted anyways with the grade that they have. So we will use grade 11 grades when necessary, but obviously our goal is to use the most recent and accurate information that we can. So once we get grade 12 midterm grades or final grades, we use those.
Thank you. See a couple of questions about do we care about your order for OUAC? We do not care what order you put us in on the Ontario University Application Center website. So just to note that. Saw a question in here. Bill, someone was asking, is it okay if they repeat their experiences on their AAF as well as in their video interview?
Absolutely. So the AIF is going to be assessed by a different subset of assessors than the interview. So it should be something that if it's something significant that you want to highlight, you want to highlight it both in the AIF and in the interview. When you're talking about the interview, it's talking about your motivation. There is some overlap with that on the admission information form as well. So it's quite possible that you'll have some repeated information between the two. And in some sense, it gives you two chances at getting noticed by the admissions committee. So it's always good to highlight that information.
Oh, and another Bill, math contest. There's lots of math contest questions if we are looking into math contests.
So a math contest won't get you admitted into an engineering program. If you're top in the math contest, that's no guarantee that you get into software engineering or computer engineering or mechatronics engineering, for example. But certainly, the same way that any extracurricular activity can show that you have knowledge of the discipline and kind of the ability to handle work outside of coursework, participation in a math contest or a programming competition or a hackathon that can help with respect to understanding you as an applicant, and it can help us assess your level of capability. So it's always great to participate in those competitions, and certainly, it'll be taken into account as an extracurricular activity. But it's not something that you are required to do. You can get admission to any one of our programs without doing the Euclid or without doing, Hack the North or any of the other hackathons or competitions that are out there. Those are not guarantees of admission.
It's actually a couple questions, Bill, for the AIF. Some things say in the last 12 months. Can they stretch that to talk about things they've done last summer? Or is it a hard stop on in the last 12 months?
Well, I'll leave that up to the applicants, right? So on the AIF, it does definitely emphasize the last 12 months in terms of hours. Many applicants will have activities that extend before that as well, and may have achievements that were significant outside of that window. Obviously, we do kind of look at the last 12 months. But if you have something going further back, that's fine. So when we say 12 months, by the way, that goes back into grade 11 at this point for most students, right? Because if you're currently in grade 12, we're really talking about what have you done kind of this fall, last summer, last spring, and even going back to, I would say, last fall as well, right? So that's kind of the time frame that we're talking about. And depending upon when you write the AIF, right, it changes when the last 12 months are. So there's already some gray area there as well. So, just do your best. Try to emphasize the things that really matter and are relatively recent. But like I said, if you have some significant achievement that happened 2 years ago or 3 years ago, there's no harm in putting it in, provided you've got space to do so, right? If you don't have space to do so, then you don't want to displace something that's recent with something that's older.
Thank you. All right. Wrap up almost a little bit, be conscious of time. I was going to say, Anna and IPN, do you guys want to have anything to say, or did you want to kind of talk a bit about your program? I see there was a couple questions just asking about programs. If you want to just speak to your program and kind of explain it a little bit, perhaps.
Sure. So the chemical engineering program is designed in a way that in your first year, you have a design studio course. So in our first year, we made a soap bar, and then we ran a soap symposium. And this helped the students in the stream 4 to have that on their resume, and then to go into industries like pharmaceuticals and your Procter and Gamble's, your detergents, and that type of industry. And then each engineering program, as I'm pretty sure side management, all of these engineering programs has these studio design courses where you get that hands-on learning to then get onto your application or your co-op term. And it all depends on the program and how you can leverage that experience and write about it as well. And it's all about translating the way that you write about in your AIF onto your resume.
Something I can mention on my end from system design engineering. I think I saw a question about what's the difference between systems design and software. I think a common misconception with systems design is people's head goes to like computer systems. And although systems design does have like programming courses, the key aspect of understanding what systems design is the word design. So you're gonna have every term you have like a design class. So for example, in my first term, I had a design course and it was completely project based. So it's a project we did from start to end, following the design cycle. But I think that's really like what encapsulates like systems design. And it's that attention to, human factors in design, ergonomics, that like human centricity that I had mentioned before. And something else to note is that systems design, I think the class size is like 90 people. It's a smaller class. So that leads to a very, it feels much more personal. There's a tight-knit community. And yeah, I guess I wanted to say that about system design.
Thank you. Okay, let's see if there's any more in here. Bill, did you have any final kind of thoughts or anything as we kind of wrap up?
So there were a few questions about scholarships, about whether you need to apply for scholarships or not. Most scholarships do not require an application. Applicants are automatically considered, but there are a few where you do need to apply. If you want, you can go to the University of Waterloo website, and if you just search for undergraduate entrance awards, you should find there's kind of this searchable database, if you will, of all the awards that we have. And if any of them require an application, you can find those there. Most of the awards that require an application are typically very specific awards. For example, the awards for Black and Indigenous students, for example. But there may be other awards as well. Sometimes there's ones for a specific school board and various other ethnic groups, for example. Um, I saw this morning there was an award for Serbian students, for example. So, whatever a donor wants to donate towards, they can. So definitely, check out that awards database and see if there's an award that you can apply to that maybe is not one of the typical ones.
Awesome. Okay, so just going to mention a couple things before we wrap up here. So again, I saw a couple questions just talking about asking when your AF and your interview, when you can set that up and everything. So after you apply, you will get an email from us within 2 weeks with the details for your AF and your interview. So you don't have to go hunting for that. It will be sent to you. And again, to mention, our admission deadline is January 15th with those documents due on January 31st. Any questions that you guys have after this or didn't get answered during this, again, please email us at enginfo@uwaterloo.ca. And definitely make sure you check out our Ask a Warrior and our Shadow Day program, and also a reminder of our upcoming open house on Saturday, November 9th. Registration is now open on our website. But with that, I think I will wrap up this webinar. I just want to say thank you so much to Bill and Anna and IPAN and our back-end people that are answering all of our questions. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Again, the webinar will be emailed out within the next 2 weeks or so, and it will also be posted on our YouTube and our website. So definitely check that out and feel free to email us if you have any other questions. But with that, I hope everyone has a great night and thank you so much.